Hello, Year 9. It's Mr. Asapadi here with another video about Buddhism. If you remember, we've looked at the Buddha's life story, and we began to look last time at the Buddha's teaching of the what Buddhism calls the Four Noble Truths. These are the most important teachings in Buddhism, and we looked at the first one last time. So the title for today is How Can I Understand and Evaluate the Buddha's Teachings about the Cause of Dukkha? Make sure you've got that title down, and I'll move on to the next slide. Remember, I'll sometimes move on quickly, so if you need to write the title down still, just pause the video. Okay, I think last time I didn't actually put anything on the slides saying that this is about the Four Noble Truths, so it might be worth writing down the thing in the box at the top of this slide. The Four Noble Truths are the most important teachings in Buddhism. It's hard to say whether they're a teaching, one teaching, or four teachings, because they're actually four truths. Well, Buddhists think they're truths, but they're all linked together. So they're all kind of about the same thing. Now, last time make sure you've got that thing in the box at the top right down. You don't need to write this thing down, the second thing down, because we wrote this down before. I said before that the Buddha said that he was like a doctor in the way that he taught. So he looked for some symptoms. That's what's wrong with someone. He looks at the diagnosis. What is the cause of that problem? He looks at the prospects. Can people get better? And he looks at the treatment. How people get better? So last time we looked at the first of the Four Noble Truths, which is the symptoms. Buddhism says that life is full of dukkha, and dukkha means suffering. So today we're going to look at the second Noble Truth, the diagnosis. What is the cause of our suffering? Now you might think, well, that's pretty obvious. The cause of our suffering is that there's a lot of bad stuff in the world. The reason why people are unhappy. What kinds of suffering did we look at before? We looked at, physical and mental suffering. Someone gets punched or gets a disease. Well, that's what causes them to suffer. But Buddhism says no. Buddhism says actually we need to look inside ourselves to look at the cause of suffering. So let's look at the next slide. So the diagnosis, the cause of suffering, is what Buddhism calls Tanha. And Tanha means craving. So can you write down the words in the blue box? The Buddha said the cause of suffering is craving. Tanha is the Buddhist word. This means wanting things. So you suffer because you want things. Now, if you think to last time when we looked at the different kinds of dukkha, different kinds of suffering, one of the kinds of suffering Buddhism looked at was viparinama dukkha. And that was the second of the kinds of suffering, and that is suffering because things come to an end. So remember I said the example of you go on a nice holiday, and then on the last day of the holiday you feel suffering because you know it's going to come to an end soon, even though you're enjoying it. Now, what Buddhism would say is that the reason you're suffering then isn't actually because the holiday's coming to an end. That is happening, but that's not the cause of the suffering. The cause of the suffering is that you want the holiday to continue. If you didn't want the holiday to continue, if you weren't craving after being on holiday, then you wouldn't suffer. And Buddhism says if you look in general, if you didn't crave after things, if you didn't keep thinking, I want this and I don't want this and I want this, I don't want this, then you would never suffer. Because if you don't crave anything, if you don't want anything, there's nothing that you say, I need this to make me happy. Then you can be perfectly happy all the time, Buddhism says. You can just be completely happy because whatever happens to you, you won't mind. That's the idea. So make sure you've got the stuff in the blue box copied out. Okay, so next we're going to look at a worksheet. So I've sent you two resources. The first one is the one I want you to look at. I'll label it Worksheet 1. Have a look at that worksheet. Now, to understand what to do, we're going to look at the next slide. So just as it says there's three kinds of suffering, dukkha, it also says there's three kinds of craving, tanha. So I'm just going to read through these three kinds. The first one is called kama tanha. That means sensual pleasures craving. So in other words, craving for sense objects, experiences or thoughts which provide pleasant feelings. So in other words, this is most of the craving we have in life. So you crave after some certain kind of food. That's sense pleasure. You want to own a particular object, some clothes or a particular phone or computer or whatever it is, a new car, a new house. That's sense object because these are experiences, these are things that you experience with your senses. You look at the phone and whatever. You want to go and see a film. You want to watch TV. you want to be in the company of your friends and loved ones. That is essential pleasure because essential pleasure because you're speaking to them. Essentially just means with your senses. So you interact with people with your senses. So all of those things, anything that you crave. Now, why does that cause suffering? According to Buddhism, it causes suffering because those things don't last forever. So if you crave to have a certain possession, you want to have a new phone, that phone's going to break one day, so it causes you suffering. Or a new phone will come out and you suddenly start craving something else. If you crave to be with certain people, well, you're inevitably gonna be parted from those people one day, whether that's because you stop being friends with that person, you have a falling out, whether it's because that you have to move away to another place where that person is not, whether it's because in the end of our lives, everyone comes to an end. Everyone's life ends one day, so that person might die. So it's a sad truth, but Buddhism says craving after, wanting to be with people, that's going to cause you suffering. Same with anything you crave. Everything you crave is impermanent. It's going to come to an end one day, so it's going to lead to suffering. The next one, bhava tanha. Well, bhava tanha means craving for being. This means the craving to exist. Now, everyone, Buddhism says, or most people, crave to exist. They want to exist. They want to stay existing. And of course, that leads to suffering because Buddhism teaches and everyone knows that one day we'll stop existing. Everyone lives and then they die. But no one really wants to die, so it causes us suffering. It also includes, bhava tanha, craving to be a certain kind of person, to have a certain identity or status, whether that's to be popular, to be powerful, to be rich, to be famous. Now, all of these things lead to suffering. Why? Because, well, if you crave to be famous, you're probably going to lose that fame one day. Nothing sadder is there than when you see some famous singer or band or something that you remember when you were young. When you see them and they used to be playing at the biggest arenas and stuff, and now they're playing like, I don't know, the Dog and Duck pub down the road. It's tragic because everyone wants to keep that fame, so it means they suffer. If you're crave to be popular, well, no one stays popular forever. There's going to be times when you're not popular. If you crave to be rich, well, you might lose your money or you might not. You might keep it to the end of your life, but if you're at the end of your life, you can't take that money with you, so you're going to stop being rich at some point. So all those things lead to suffering. The last one is probably the strangest one, vibhava tanha, craving for non-existence. This means the desire to not exist. Interesting, Buddhism says that sometimes you can desire to exist and not exist at the same time. But sadly, some people desire not to live anymore. Things like that. That sadly is a part of life for some people. But also, vibhava tanha can also have things like, well, there are times when you kind of just wish you didn't exist right now. Like if you're in an embarrassing situation, something's happened to you where you feel embarrassed, and you wish the phrase we have is, we wish the ground could open up and swallow us up. We wish we weren't there. That can lead to suffering too, because if you crave to not be in a situation and you're in that situation, well, you're going to suffer. So those are the three kinds of suffering. Now, to understand these a little bit more, I want you to look at that worksheet. So there are two tasks on the worksheet. The first one is, it gives you loads of kinds of suffering, and then it gives you some kinds of craving. And what you've got to do is try and link them up. So there's 10 examples of suffering, and then there's 10 examples of craving. So I want you to try and draw lines between them. They are muddled up, so it's not like one goes with A. So the 10 sufferings are 1 to 10, 10 cravings are A to J. So try and link which number one, which one goes with that, and so on and so on. Try and link them up, and then when it says in the box, it says type of craving, I want you to think, is that kama tanha? Is that craving for sense pleasures? If it is, put 1. Is it craving for being, craving to exist or be a particular kind of person? If it is, put 2. Or is it vibhava tanha, craving for non-existence? If it's that one, put 3. So see what you can do. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to pause the video. But I should say, when we feedback, I'm not going to go through every single answer. I'm just going to go through a few, because the idea isn't necessarily to get all of these absolutely correct. The idea is just to get your head around the different kinds of craving and why craving is supposed to lead to suffering in Buddhism. So pause the video, and we'll feedback in a minute just to go through a couple of examples. Okay, let's just go through a few then, shall we? An angry person stabs you with a knife in the arm with a knife. Why you? How is it caused by craving? Well, it should be linked to B. You are attached to your body. You desire an experience more pleasant than the one with a knife. You crave a more comfortable state. So it should be type of craving. It should be number one because it's kama tanha. You basically desire to have a life where you're free from a pain in your arm. Now you might already start to think Buddhism's a bit weird here because I've been stabbed with a knife. I would have thought the cause of suffering was that someone stabbed me with a knife, not my craving. Well, we'll come back to that. That is an interesting point. Okay, let's look at another one. Let's do number 3. You were upset because your girlfriend or boyfriend has left you. Which one is that? I'm doing this live. Okay, so this should be R. You've become attached to a person and how they make you feel. You desire permanence, but all things are impermanent. You want to have that good boyfriend and girlfriend permanently, but you should know that Buddhism says these things are impermanent. What kind of craving is that? Well, I think number 1, it could be a little bit of number 2 because it might be that you crave the status as someone who's popular and has a partner. That could be a bit of both. Okay, let's have a look. Number 4, you are annoyed because a friend has challenged your beliefs. Okay, this could be A. You were attached to certain beliefs. Perhaps you desire that other people always agree with you. Now, this should be number 2, right? Bhavatana, you want to be the sort of person who's always seen as right, so it's about your status. You don't like it when people disagree with you. Let's go down to number 8. You don't like your life as it is. You want to end it. A sad one. Which one must this be? You should have got there before me. C. You desire not to exist. The suffering experience in life has led you to desire death and an end to all experience. That should be number 3. Number 3, a bit of a horrible one, that one. We do one more. You are hungry because you've run out of food. Number 5. Why are you craving? J. You desire food. You are attached to feeling comfortable and full of food all the time. You crave only fine foods and won't eat more simple and plain food. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? It doesn't quite match up because it doesn't say. It just said you've run out of all food there. But there we go. Now what would that be? That would be number 1, a craving for sensual pleasures. I suppose in the end it would be number 2 if you were not just wanted food because you were hungry, but because you were starving, you couldn't exist anymore. But you can see how it works, right? Buddhism is basically saying that any of these kinds of craving are going to lead you to suffering in the end. Now, what do we think about this? Well, we're going to look at how people might criticize it, because I think you can kind of understand what Buddhism means. If you had no cravings, if you didn't care about having any sensual pleasures, like having any friends or having any experiences that you liked or any possessions, then nothing really could make you unhappy. If you didn't care about existing, then you would be happy. If you didn't care about not existing, then you would be happy. You would just be happy all the time. But there are some problems with what Buddhism has to say, and let's have a look at 2 of them before I get you. First problem is summed up by this slide. According to Buddhism, why are these people suffering? So imagine, here's 3 people who've had a car crash. Imagine they've all broken their leg. They're in great pain. The second picture, there's someone clearly being bullied and being left out. Now, according to Buddhism, why is the people suffering who've been in the car crash? Well, it's not because of the car crash. It's because they crave to not have a broken leg. Now, that seems kind of weird for us, because if we were to say why were they suffering, we would probably say, well, I think it's the car crash. That's what's made them suffer. So that's a bit of an odd one. What about the bullying one? Well, according to Buddhism, she's suffering because of her craving. She craves to be popular and have friends. When she's not popular and hasn't got friends, she's suffering. Whereas we would probably say, well, this doesn't seem a very nice response. Probably we would say she's suffering because of the cruel actions of other people. So this is one way in which Buddhism could be criticized. It could seem to be said that Buddhism, when people are suffering, Buddhism blames the person who's suffering rather than the thing that caused the suffering. It just says, well, you shouldn't have craved to not have that thing. Well, that seems cruel to me and to a lot of people. Although, as we'll see later in the lesson, Buddhism actually has a response to that. Buddhism is not quite as cruel as it might seem from what I've just said. My second thing is this. This graph represents the idea of, well, what actually is a happy life? What makes up a happy life? Does Buddhism recommend quite a boring approach to life? So if you have a look on the side, I've got like a sad face, an in-between face, and a smiley face. And that represents our level of happiness. And then across the bottom represents things that happen in life. Now, I've made up a series of things that could happen to someone in their life that might make them happy and sad. So I've put, they get a dog, that makes them happy. Dog dies, that makes them sad. They go to Roller World, that's one of my favourite things to do, to go to Roller World, because I love roller skating. They break their leg at Roller World, so they get really happy at Roller World. They break their leg at Roller World, they get sad. They get married, they're happy. They become king of the world or the universe or something, and they get even happier. Now, what do the different lines represent? Well, the red line is supposed to represent the normal reaction of people have to that. So they get a dog, they're happy. The dog dies, they get really sad. They go to Roller World, they love it, they're really happy. They break their leg, they get sad. They get married, they get happier, they become king, happier and happier and happier, and so on and so on. Some people complained here because I put going to Roller World was better than getting married. It was higher than, but I really like Roller World, so what can I say? Now, what does the green line represent though? That just stays the same. This seems to me, or it did at first, I'm going to put another slide on which might challenge that, but this at first seemed to me what Buddhism was recommending. Whereas most people would be happy, then sad, then happy and sad. And that seems like to me, a real life, that life is full of ups and downs, and that's kind of part of the joy of it. You're happy and then you're sad and so on and so on. Buddhism seemed to be recommending just no response at all. You get a dog, well, you have got no craving to have a dog or not have a dog, so you're fine. The dog dies, you're fine because you don't care. You go to Roller World, well, you don't care. You've got no craving to do anything, so you don't care about it. You break your leg, well, you've got no craving not to have a broken leg, so you don't care. Get married, you don't crave to get married. Become king, you couldn't care less. So the idea, to me, it just seemed very flat. Like Buddhism just is like, you're just not bothered by anything. Now, I suppose that's good in the way that it means that you don't experience the sadness of like when the dog died or where you broke your leg. But at the same time, you're not experiencing the great happiness that you can experience in life. So isn't it a bit kind of make the whole thing a bit pointless? Well, I actually I made this graph and I showed it to a Buddhist once, and I said, isn't this just what a Buddhist believes in? And the Buddhist said, no, actually, what we believe in is this next slide. So what Buddhists would say is actually, I've put another level of happiness, the smiley face with the sunglasses at the top, and they would say actually, when you reach what Buddhists are trying to do is get rid of all their craving, right, and reach nirvana. That's what we're going to look at in our next lesson. They say once you get rid of all your craving, you reach nirvana. And Buddhists say that actually, when you reach a life with no craving, you actually find a level of happiness that's beyond anything that you can have through getting your cravings. If this is true, now this is a debatable point though, isn't it? It doesn't sound that exciting, a life with no craving, where you don't crave after anything. But if it was true that actually if you got rid of all your cravings, you could reach a level of happiness, a kind of peaceful happiness, but it was actually higher than anything that you get through getting the stuff that you crave, then Buddhism would make a bit more sense. It would make more sense that Buddhists would go through life trying to not crave anything. So I thought those two graphs hopefully make a bit of sense of how someone might criticize Buddhism in the first one, but then how a Buddhist might respond and say, actually, we're not going for like a boring life where you've got without cravings. We think that if you get rid of your cravings, you reach something higher, like an amazingly peaceful and great state of mind. Okay, so I'm going to put the ball in your court now and ask you to do these two things. Firstly, there's a sheet, the information sheet that I'm going to put on the on Teams. It's called "Is All the Suffering in the World Caused by Craving?" and it has some Buddhists on and some non-Buddhists, and they have a little discussion in the speech bubbles there where some criticisms of the Buddhist point of view have been put across, and then the Buddhists defend themselves. I want you to read that first of all. It won't take very long. And then it says "you choose" in big letters there. I want you to pick from the tasks that are going to be on the board. That I'm also going to put these on the information sheet so you can have them in front of you. But I want you to pick two tasks from the next slide and complete those tasks in your book or on your paper. It's up to you which ones you pick, but I'll just talk you through them. So first task, you could draw your own version of that happiness timeline. You know the timeline I saw where it had the events in your life along, and then it had a line to represent normal people, how they would react, and then how a Buddhist should respond. And then an explanation. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the? Do you think it would be better to have the green line where you're just the same all the time, or do you prefer to? Do you think it's better to experience the ups and downs of life? That would be one task you could do. Second one, Buddhism is a cruel religion because it tells people who are suffering that it is their own fault. Write a response to the statement, including an explanation of reasons to agree, an explanation of reasons to disagree, and your own views with reasons. So explain why Buddhism could be seen as cruel. If you're not sure, have a look at the information sheet or go back and look at the piece of video where I talked about this with the people in the car crash and so on. So yeah, you need to have both sides of the view. So you need to be able to say why Buddhism disagrees. You've got to go to the information sheet for this and then put your view across. Number 3, draw a different image. Draw an image, if you're artistic, you could do this one, to represent each of the 3 kinds of craving. Underneath each image, explain why Buddhists think this kind of craving leads to suffering. So an artistic one. 4, another discussion one. Life is about being happy with what you have, not about getting what you don't have. So obviously that would be a kind of Buddhist point of view. It's about not craving. Write 2 paragraphs responding to the statement. One explaining whether a Buddhist would agree or disagree and why. Well, I'm telling you now they would agree, but tell me why. And one explaining why they would, whether you agree or disagree and why. What do you think? Have a look at the information sheet if you want to do that one. Number 5, imagine the Buddha is alive today and has just tweeted this message from @Buddha. The best way to live is give up craving. If you do not have any selfish desires, you will be completely happy. Write a response to him, telling him if you agree with him, give reasons for your views. The tweet must be at most 140 characters long, including spaces. So that's a way in which you can kind of summarize your views very neatly. Number 6, think of everything we've done on Buddhism so far. Create a 10-question multiple choice quiz about what we've learned about Buddhism so far. Make sure you know what the answers are to the quiz. So look, if you're trying to go for higher level stuff, I would say number 2 or number 4, the ones you could pick. But if you want to mix one of those 2 with another task, if you want to do the artistic ones, however you want to do it, it's up to you. Okay. If there's any problems or anything you're not sure about, please contact me on Teams. Let me know. Thanks a lot.